I use the talents that I have for others. I think that's been a big thing, a big part of our life.
Welcome to the Paul Plett podcast. Basically, this is an excuse for me to sit down and have a conversation with people that I find interesting. And joining me today is Menno Plett. Menno is a father, a husband, a gardener, and he also happens to be my dad. Welcome here, Menno. How's it going?
Okay, so far.
Yeah? For people who don't know you or have never heard of you or don't know anything about you, how do you explain who you are, what you do, what your life's been about?
Oh, I grew up on a farm about 30, 40 minutes from Winnipeg. Always enjoyed farming, enjoyed growing up there. But then in adult life, young adult already, I had an adventure in mind and went out to serve with MCC. Do we mention names here?
Yeah, Mennonite Central Committee.
Mennonite Central Committee, and we worked first of all individual, single, but then later as married person, and then later, we served for about 33 years overseas, and mostly in Africa.
Okay.
So I'm retired now and looking back.
Wow. Okay. So that work with MCC, with Mennonite Central Committee, what was that work that you did?
Oh, that'll take a bit of a time to explain, but it was in many sections.
Yeah.
My interest was initially to do agricultural work in Africa, and then later it moved into more administrative and leadership positions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. If we go all the way back to the beginning, you kind of mentioned that you were born. Where were you born?
Well, the place exactly was in Steinbach, Manitoba. But then that was about 20 kilometers from where I grew up, which was Landmark, Manitoba.
Okay.
Yeah.
Landmark, Manitoba, small town.
Yeah, in those days it was hardly a town.
Okay.
It was a little store, 2 or 3 businesses, but otherwise it was basically a farming community and a school.
Yeah.
And a church.
And what was life like growing up?
Well, I grew up in a large family. My parents had 11 children, so there was always things happening on the farm and in the garden, and both working and playing.
Yeah.
Playing often in the barn, in the hayloft, playing on the snowbanks, making snow houses, skating in the ditch in the fall. Just most everything happened on the farm or at neighbors' farms.
Yeah.
We rarely went to the city, most everything was out there in the countryside.
So this is like 1950s, 1960s.
Yeah, I was born in 47, so yeah, 50s and 60s as a youngster, yeah.
Yeah. That's a completely different era, right? Like that's sort of like post-World War II Manitoba.
Yeah, it's different for many people. It's different for you now, where you live in a city.
Yeah.
But even in those days, we'd rarely meet people from the city, but we did know some.
Yeah.
And their comments often were something like, "What do you do in the country? Must be very boring. Must be very lonely out there." Well, I had never thought of it as being lonely or boring. We had so many things to do.
Yeah.
We'd have a very few toys, basic things, but we'd often take Dad's tools and wagons and do stuff with things we had.
Yeah.
Even to the point of going out into the bush and chopping down trees and making a little log cabin.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. When was that? How old were you when you made?
Well, by then I was probably in grade 8.
Yeah.
Must have been about 14 years old.
Was it a full log cabin?
Well, full in a sense, with walls maybe 6 feet high.
Yeah.
And then not with a peaked roof, but just a slanting roof.
Wow.
Poplar trees cut down. The door was maybe, if it was a door, an opening into it was only about 3-4 feet high.
Yeah.
And then the roof, we put moss on the roof.
Yeah.
We found out later that it's not very waterproof.
Okay.
But we did even build a little bed inside, and we took a little stove there to keep warm.
Yeah.
But we had many trips. Trips meaning walking across the field about a mile or so.
Yeah.
To our little log cabin.
Little bush outside of Landmark.
Yeah. We hadn't actually talked to the owner of that bush. Mm-hmm. And one day while we were busy cutting down trees, he came to the scene, and he was there, and we were quite embarrassed, but also a bit afraid. What might he do? He had a bit of a grisly-looking face, but Mr. Workington was very kind to us. He said,
the farmer's name was Mr. Workington?
I see you've been busy here. It would be good if you're on somebody else's property. You should first make arrangements. Don't just assume that it's yours.
Okay.
But carry on, have fun. I thought that would turn out differently. I thought he would give us a real serious scolding.
Yeah. Or
maybe even physically tell us to get lost.
Wow. Yeah.
But he was very kind about it. He knew what it was to be a young boy.
Yeah. So you're living in Landmark on a farm.
Yeah.
Doing all the stuff you do on a farm in rural Manitoba in the 1950s and 1960s. At what point, I mean, there's sort of a major event that happens when you decide to move to Africa for the first time. What happened there?
Well, for some people, young people, they know exactly what they want to do. They go to school and they figure out their life's work, and on the way they go pursuing that goal. I had, I don't know if you call it hiccups, but mine wasn't so straightforward. Mm-hmm. I basically thought I wanted to farm or maybe teach. So I was in first year university and still kind of wondering which way to go. During that year, I already decided what I wanted to do.
Yeah. That
I would be interested in going overseas the following year.
Okay.
In part to try to figure my life out a bit, try to get a bit more sense of what direction do I want to take.
Yeah.
And can I do agricultural work doing that?
Sure,
those kind of things.
So the Mennonites have there's a bit of a tradition of migrating, of traveling, but then also with sort of Mennonite Central Committee, Mennonites have a bit of a tradition of working overseas, working with various populations that working alongside populations that might need support in the global South, Latin America, Africa, Asia, etc. Did you grow up, when you're on the farm in the 50s and 60s, did you know about Mennonite Central Committee, about that work? Is that part of...
Yeah, my parents would often talk about how MCC was started. Its beginning was with Mennonite people in the Ukraine.
Okay.
Who were, this was just after the Russian Revolution.
Okay, around what year?
Around the 1920s.
Early 1900s.
Yeah.
Sure.
1920 is when MCC was started.
Okay.
But in response to something that had been building up and developing in the country.
Okay.
At that time it was called Southern Russia, I think.
Sure.
But now we call it Ukraine, and I don't know how long, but I hope that will continue.
Sure.
But that is, initially was helping our brothers and sisters in the sense that the same church.
Yeah.
But then later, of course...
Because, our family and a number of other Mennonite families moved from that area of Russia sort of earlier. I guess we were part of an 1870s migration from Russia to Manitoba. and now responding to other folks who are still there, who
Yeah.
kind of got enveloped in the Russian Revolution.
Yeah.
MCC started responding to that,
Yeah.
and your parents talked about that growing
Yeah.
up. Okay.
Yeah, it was between the two world wars. World War I was recently done,
Yeah.
1918, and then World War II, of course, started in 1939. So there was about 20 years between there.
Yeah.
But that's when MCC started.
Yeah. And you learned about that growing up.
Yeah, both that, and also I was always very interested when missionaries would report to our church,
Sure.
showing pictures, and it seemed like generally speaking, like very interesting work, interesting exposure.
Yeah.
And also I knew the 3 young fellows in our community who had gone to India to work with MCC.
Okay.
Just a few years ago.
Yeah.
And they were writing back good reports, so that consolidated my idea. Well, I'd like to do that.
Yeah.
And then I spoke to another fellow in our community who was a friend.
Yeah.
And he also wanted to go, so we signed up together in a sense, and we signed up together. Each of us signed up.
Yeah.
And it would be up to MCC to assign us where we would go.
Totally.
So that was it.
Was there, so not a whole bunch of people from the community were signing up, but a couple of them were interested in the way you were interested, and it didn't totally feel like a complete shot in the dark. There's a bit of a movement kind of in that direction, or a couple folks are doing that.
Yeah.
Okay, so you sign up. MCC, Mennonite Central Committee, send me where you want to send me. Where'd they send you? What happened?
Yeah, I signed up, and then you had to put your preference. In those days, you put down a preference, which countries you'd want to go. And I put down, the first country was Bolivia, and the second one was Bangladesh.
Wow.
And the third one was either Congo or Africa. I'm not sure what I put down.
Yeah.
And
Africa.
Yeah, I think it was. I imagine it was a country.
No, that's great though. So okay, so maybe not. It would be funny though if you were like Bolivia, Bangladesh, Africa.
Yeah. Part of it, what it was, I looked at the agriculture of the countries and their programs, and I saw both in Bolivia and Bangladesh they had a very strong agricultural program.
Sure.
So that interested me.
Okay.
And then it was Congo, which.
So because you had a agricultural, I mean, you grew up on the farm, playing with tools, building log cabins. But you also, along that way, you kind of got a bit of an agricultural bug. You like...
Well, yeah. I mean, we grew crops and we had animals.
Yeah.
And so and those days, especially from a very young age, you started helping to do the chores. I was only 16 when my folks went on a trip to Mexico, and they entrusted looking after the farm to me.
Okay.
So you learned about agriculture from very young. You learn about how closely nature you're in touch with nature.
Yeah.
And nature calls a lot of shots.
Yeah.
You don't just mark on your calendar, this day we're going to start seeding, this day we're going to start harvesting. You have an idea when it'll be, but it might be
interesting.
It might be weeks earlier or later.
Yeah.
And then when that time is there, you drop everything else and you get on the things that are season or day related.
Yeah.
You take care of those first.
Yeah.
You don't kind of spend your time at doing things that can be done later.
Yeah.
You do the seeding and the harvesting, especially. Those two are very important to get it done on time.
And you like being connected to that pattern. I mean, again, like everywhere we've gone, if we've had a yard, you've had a garden to want to connect yourself with nature in that way, with the seasons.
It's very therapeutic also for me.
Yeah.
I know when we were living close to Toronto, I had a garden, and after being in the office all day, for me it was great being home. But one of the main reasons was I could go straight to my garden and do some work there.
Yeah.
I can do office work and sitting behind a desk.
Yeah.
As long as there's a window, I can see what's going on outside.
Yeah.
But the planting, growing, harvesting things was always part of my life.
Yeah. So yeah, you put your name in the hat, Bolivia, Bangladesh, or Congo, and you get called to move to where?
To Congo, which was had been colonized by Belgium.
Okay.
But was newly independent Congo. It was in 1969. I think they gave their independence probably in early 60s.
Yeah. So then you get in a plane?
Yeah, I had never been in a plane before, but we got on a plane.
What year was this?
1969,
Wow.
June.
Woodstock.
Yeah, June of 1969. We got onto this plane. MCC liked to save money when they could, so they a lot of guys that went to Africa would take the flight to Europe with Icelandic Airways because we could get a cheaper flight with them. It was a four-motor plane.
Okay.
So that was a new experience. There were 6 of us that were heading to. First of all, we headed to Belgium.
Okay.
With this plane. To do language study, to study French for 4 months.
Yes, because they speak French in Congo.
Yeah. That's one of the official languages. So we get a smattering of French in Belgium first, and then after 4 months we went on to Congo.
Okay, what's it like to move to Congo? What were your first impressions?
Yeah, some people they have impressions or they have ideas or they conceive of all kinds of things, how it might be. I didn't do a lot of that.
Yeah,
I had ideas, but I didn't set myself up to be either very disappointed or the other way.
Yeah.
I left it pretty open.
It's going to be what it's going to be.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, the first thing that hits you, especially when you grew up in rural Manitoba in those days, even in the city, you would quite rarely meet somebody who was not Caucasian.
Okay.
And in Congo, you got off at the airport in what was then known as, well, it was Kinshasa.
Yeah.
And you look around.
Kinshasa, coastal town?
Kinshasa is a little ways in.
Sure.
A few hundred kilometers in, but
anyway, you get off the plane, not a lot of white people.
That's kind of hits you at first.
Yeah.
Bad or good, it's just different.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden you get a feeling of what it means to be in a minority. We had been given very strict instructions never to let sight of our passports.
Gotcha.
But the first thing that they did was they took all our passports and disappeared with them. So much for following directions, but of course, directions aren't all known at orientation time.
Yeah. So
they took our passports and then they informed us that within 3 months we should be able to pick them up or so.
Really?
At a different address in town. 3 months or 3 weeks. It was an extended period of time anyway.
Yeah.
And we had to travel up country.
Yeah.
Before that time. Yeah.
So did you get them back?
Yeah, we got them back. Yeah. It wasn't our head office didn't inform us that there were variations on the theme. It was that every country and every border official will operate in the same way that we had been instructed.
Yeah, a bit of the Wild West.
Yeah, and you learned to be flexible. Either that or you came apart.
Yeah. So you discovered another part of yourself.
Yeah.
Through the experience.
Part of yourself, and you discovered part of what the world is like.
Yeah.
It's different. Every country is different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I like that. I appreciate that. I also have a hard time sort of visualizing, conceptualizing an experience before I do it. Can do a little bit of that, but it's nice to just have the experience. So then anything theoretical can ram up against reality.
Yeah.
You can say, well, this is what it's actually like, as opposed to, I mean, living in your head, living in your thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't want to be too terribly disappointed, and so I try to, some things you just carry on. You try to be organized, try to know where your passport is and know where your stuff is to travel. Hopefully you won't have too much luggage.
Yeah.
Because you have to learn to travel in all kinds of ways.
Yeah.
Being on the back of trucks, on dugout canoes, you name it.
Yeah.
Keep it light and keep remembering the important things.
Yeah.
But don't worry or don't fret yourself about the things that you have limited control over.
You land in Kinshasa, but where do you end up working? What do you end up doing in Congo?
You see, in those days there were so many volunteers. I think there were about 80 of us. Mm-hmm. Not that arrived at that time, but 80 or so in the country.
Okay. So MCC had 80 workers in Congo.
So they have 80 different assignments, and they'd assigned, I would be going together with another fellow, his name was Eldon Stolzfuss. We were going to be in Kisangani. It's basically a university town.
Okay.
On more or less on the equator, but right on the Congo River.
Okay.
But by the time the stuff is fluid.
Fluid, yeah.
Stuff is fluid, so you don't necessarily know what's going to happen. By the time we arrived, I was not going to Kisangani. Eldon Stolzfuss was not coming at that time.
Okay.
And I was going to be assigned to work at a community farm owned by the Kimbangwis Church.
Okay.
At a farm just maybe half an hour outside of Kinshasa.
Okay.
And my friend, he was going to be going. He was going to work at a school for a while. Right, they were constructing a school.
Yeah.
A Bible school, right in Kinshasa. He was going to be there for X number of months, and then later be reassigned.
Okay.
So, anyways, yeah.
So things are moving. But you end up on a farm in Congo.
It was called Lutendele.
Okay.
That was a small farm owned by the Kimbangwis Church. Kimbangwis Church was what is called an indigenous church. It didn't have a start as a mission handed over to Congolese, but it was Congolese who had started it themselves.
Oh, okay. So you end up working at a church farm, indigenous church farm. What are they growing? What do you?
Yeah, they had different crops in a big garden.
Yeah.
They were only beginning to grow some crops, which they hoped to market in Kinshasa.
Okay.
They had a big beginning of a big vegetable garden.
Yeah.
They had cucumbers, watermelons, just a whole range of things.
Wow. And had you ever grown cucumbers, watermelons, this range of things?
Yeah, at home in the garden. Yeah.
Oh, you had. Okay, so you had experience with these crops.
Yeah.
Okay.
But they did it a bit differently there than we do at home.
Okay. And how long were you in Congo for, working on this farm?
Well, those are two different answers.
Sure. Okay.
On this farm, I think we were there for about 4 months.
Okay.
But the problem was there were probably too many expatriates there.
The 80 volunteers.
On that farm.
Okay.
There were Terry Graber and myself. Terry was from Florida. The two of us were assigned there, but besides us, there was an Australian, an Austrian, and a German, and a Chinese man, and then there was another Swiss guy and two Swiss people. There was an overload of expatriates on this farm. They had not really worked with expatriates before.
Okay.
So there were some issues there with regards to what we should do or could do.
Yeah.
And things came to a bit of a head, and we were reassigned.
Okay.
And then I was reassigned to work in a teacher's college in the middle of Congo at a place in those days was called Luluabourg.
Okay.
But now it's called Kananga.
Kananga. Okay.
So I was assigned to do maintenance work at the school and in the houses that the school had.
Okay.
For teachers.
So maintenance work. So you were at the farm for 4 months. Then you moved to like an inland city.
Yeah.
To work at a college, doing maintenance work at a college.
Yeah.
Okay. And then how long were you there for?
Well, the total term, my term was going to be 27 months.
Sure. 27 months in the Congo, having lived your whole life in Manitoba, rural Manitoba on a farm.
Yeah.
Then you move to Congo and you're there for, what's 27 months? That's 2
2 years and a bit.
2 years and a bit. 2 years and a bit.
Mm. Yeah.
And you come home.
Yeah.
You're changed.
Absolutely.
What changed?
Well, the thing is, I had changed, but the people that had stayed at home had also changed. Mm-hmm. You know, we sometimes think that the only ones changing are the people that skedaddle somewhere, but that's not really
We're all
quite
changing.
true. Everybody's changed.
Yeah.
But your question was, what changed?
Well, I mean, I know that I don't know what your trajectory of life would have been. I mean, because if you've been raised in Manitoba, having learned about Mennonite Central Committee and the meaningful work that they've done, and your interest has been piqued seeing missionaries come to church and talk about it, and there's a small cohort of guys your age who are moving overseas, maybe your trajectory is that you're inevitably going to end up spending a lot of time overseas. But after this first experience overseas, this first 27 months, I mean, that you went on to live and work in Africa quite a bit.
Yeah.
How long did you end up living and working in Africa totally in your life?
A bit over 20 years.
Okay.
In Africa. I mean, relief and development work.
Yeah.
About 33 years. Because some of this was done in Canada also.
Yeah.
With MCC and another organization called World Relief Canada.
Okay.
I worked with both of those.
Yeah. So you moved back, young man, in early 1970s. Mm-hmm. Moved back to Manitoba. And then when did you get married? When did you meet Mom, get married, and when did you move back to Africa?
When I came home, I told and I'd spent some time getting home. I spent two months in Europe on my way home.
Yeah.
I was in no rush to get home. But I told myself when I left Congo that this had been very, very good, very exciting, I learned an enormous amount. As we know, learning happens not only in classrooms, but where you live. I told myself I would gladly go back to Africa or another country, but I really didn't want to go back as a single person.
Sure.
So the next job was seeing if I could find somebody who would want to live with me.
And move overseas.
So that started in earnest. But it took quite a while.
Were you an easy person to live with?
That you'd have to ask the one who did it. Anyway, long and short, I did date here and there. Mm-hmm. And I included in that agenda Lydia, who actually grew up just down the road. And some people
also from Landmark.
Yeah,
same town in Manitoba.
Same town. Their two brothers were my good friends that I played ball with and did things with. Some would have said,
So you've known Mom your whole life.
Yeah, I remember seeing her come along our driveway when we were still at breakfast because my sister was a very good friend of Lydia's.
You have a lot of siblings. She has a lot of siblings.
Yeah,
small town.
stuff happens.
A lot of friends back and forth. Yeah.
So when the time was right, I thought I asked her if she would like to join me to respond to needs of Angolan refugees in Africa, and her response was something like, well, maybe there's a few steps before that. Of course, I knew what the steps were, but why be direct when you can be indirect? So anyway, long and short, we married in 1976.
This is 1970s Mennonite courtship.
Yeah, yeah. So by then, my
1976, you get married.
Yeah.
Okay.
By then, I had completed my university degree.
Okay.
And a 2-year diploma course in agriculture.
Sure. University of Manitoba?
Yeah, that was. Okay. Yeah, the other one was at U of W, University of Winnipeg.
Yeah.
And my brothers and I, we had already bought farmland and were just keeping our fingers in the action of farming.
Okay.
Both up in Swan River and also the remaining quarter section in Landmark that my father had.
Sure. And Swan River is another small town in Manitoba.
Up in northwestern Manitoba.
Sure. So 1976, you get married. When do you move? When did you end up going and responding to the needs of Angolan?
Well, that need was not responded to by MCC.
Okay.
Things changed a bit on the field. I'm not sure exactly what, but we were interested in overseas service.
Yeah.
So we applied, and a year later, we went overseas. We married in '76, and in '77 we headed overseas.
Okay, together. Where'd you go?
We were thinking of going, well, where they wanted us to go, but where they wanted us to go was to the Congo again.
Wow.
Which would be prefaced by some more French study especially for Lydia.
Yeah.
So we went to Belgium again and did 5 months of a language study. Lydia in a language school, and I enrolled in some agricultural courses that I audited at a university just outside of Brussels.
Okay, okay. So you move, you get married, you move back to the Congo, and then when did you have your first child?
Yeah, that was actually in 1981.
So a couple years into living.
Yeah, we started there together in '77. We went to we were assigned to a small a farm.
Yeah.
Outside of a place called Kikwit in Bandundu province. We were there for 2 years, and then MCC actually asked us if we were prepared to take on the leadership of the program in the Congo.
Yeah.
Which was definitely a departure from what we had planned to do and what we had been asked to do.
Yeah.
And we gave it some good thought and checked. Yeah, ran about the idea by some of our trusted friends.
Sure.
And it was we decided that we would take that up.
And when did you have a kid?
In 1981.
Okay. Okay. So you have a kid overseas.
Yeah.
And you start a family. And then over the next number of years, how do we summarize now from that point, just so we don't go through all the points, but from there, starting a family in the Congo, how do we get to you I would say right before you move back to Landmark again, how many places have you lived? How many children have you had? Where have you raised your kids?
How many places have we lived? Where, in total? Or till that
Just
point?
which places have you lived? Yeah.
Oy, in our life.
Yeah. You've moved a lot.
Yeah, the longest we stayed at one place, I think, was in Ontario.
Yeah.
We lived there for 7 years.
Should I try to walk you through it and you just correct me if I'm wrong?
Yeah.
Yeah? So you live in Congo for a bit.
Well,
My older
after Landmark.
Yeah, my older brother Dave. Dave is born in Congo.
Yeah.
David Plett, 1981.
Yeah.
Then you move back to Manitoba.
Yeah, he was about 6 months old.
Dave's little, yeah, little baby. You move back to Manitoba to Landmark, the same town where you and Mom are both from. Where sort of that's our family town, hometown. You have another child, Ruth. My older sister Ruth Plett is born there in 1983. Then you end up moving up to Swan River.
Yeah, after working for MCC in Winnipeg.
Okay, you've worked for MCC a little bit in Winnipeg. You move up to Swan River because you had that land with your brothers.
Yeah.
You're farming it up in Swan River. You have your third child, me, Paul Plett, born on a farm in Swan River. Then you decide to go back overseas again. You decide that you've now been in Manitoba for a little bit. You have a family that's been started. Take the family on an adventure. Go down to Zambia with the whole family. That's sort of my very formative experiences are in Zambia, in southern Africa. We lived there for 6 years. Then we move as a family back to Manitoba for a couple years. And then as a whole family, we move to Sudan for a few years. Then we move as a family to Ontario for a couple years.
Yeah, 7 years.
And then you and Mom, now the kids are grown. You sort of see the kids graduate high school, sort of finish, move out a little bit on their own. And then you and Mom decide to book it off to Africa again and move to Kenya for a couple years.
Yeah, 5 years again.
So then, and that sort of rounds out, that kind of concludes. Oh, and then you move back to Manitoba for a bit, and then you moved to Strasbourg for a couple years. You moved to France for a few years.
Again, 5 years.
And then that kind of brings us, because then you move back to Landmark where you currently are.
Yeah, but there was another little assignment after that.
Oh yeah, then you moved to South Africa. You go to South Africa for a little bit.
Yeah.
What's up with all the moving?
Well, that's kind of goes with the territory. If you're going to be doing this kind of work,
Yeah.
there's moving involved.
Yeah. You like moving?
I did. It became more and more of a chore.
Yeah.
But, a lot of people, especially younger people, move a lot more often in this kind of industry and this kind of work.
Yeah.
I'd meet people, 1 year, 1.5 years, 2 years.
Yeah.
They move.
Yeah.
Ours was, we often would stay 5 years.
Yeah.
And that immerses you, unless you put a lot of insulation around yourself, but otherwise it immerses you in the culture and languages.
Yeah.
And learning about where you're living.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now you are, where are you living now?
In Landmark.
So now you're back in Landmark, where it all began. Which you've moved back to Landmark several times throughout this whole, you kind of loop back to Landmark.
Yeah, that's yeah.
What's your life like now?
It's a bit boring compared to what we've done in the past.
Okay.
But then on the other hand,
How is it boring? What are you comparing it to?
Well, that's a bit strong, but
No, go for it. I want to hear.
maybe it is given all the moving you're talking about. It's a bit similar day after day, you know.
Yeah.
In those days when we were traveling, I mean, not everybody's life was like mine. Even in our family, you know, Lydia would travel with me now and then. She'd always travel with me and live elsewhere.
Yeah.
But when I would do traveling, she didn't always accompany me.
Yeah, I mean, so a lot of the places where we lived, we would set up a little bit of a base, a hub in a city, often a capital city of a country.
Yeah.
And then you would still be doing out trips to...
when we lived in Zambia or Sudan or Congo, we didn't just live at one place.
Yeah.
We lived at one place, but we did a lot of traveling. I did a lot of traveling from that location.
Yeah.
And it was a lot easier doing that when you're living in Africa, as opposed to living in Ontario and traveling 3 times a year, for 3 weeks at a time.
Yeah, because a lot of your work is with small-scale farmers.
Yeah.
Sort of, so it kind of takes the load off. You don't have to get it all done in a week or two. You have a few years to develop and build relationships with various communities, various farms, farmers, etc.
Yeah. And mostly not directly with small farmers, but working with an organization, a local organization that works with farmers or women's groups in microfinance and so on.
But you're the person on the ground representing whatever organization you're working for. You're the person in the field making those connections with those partners, gathering that information. And that was exciting. You like that. You get excited about going out on a trip.
Yeah. You'd have a routine. You know, we'd say it's an upheaval, but it wasn't really. It wasn't sedentary completely, obviously.
Yeah.
But you'd learn how to travel. You learn what pieces you need to put in place.
Yeah.
Again, you get all your visas and everything in line, but then you think of what language you'll be, you know, it involves a lot of cultures and a lot of different languages.
Yeah.
And I enjoy that. It's not a tedious thing to do.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of stimulation. Some of those stimulants I don't have necessarily.
Yeah.
But that happens to people when they get my age and when they retire.
Yeah.
If you don't even have to be a workaholic, but if you enjoy work, when you're doing less of it, you kind of miss it.
Yeah. How old are you now?
That would be 76.
No, I mean, it seems like even hearing about your relationship with sort of agriculture and kind of growing up, it seems like you like to have a level of structure, routine, and discipline, but then to throw that against unknowns. The unknown of, well, you don't know what the weather's going to do, what the seasons are going to do. You got to be ready to adapt. The unknown of, I was told not to let my passport out of my sight. I can't get into the country unless I give this government officer my passport. The unknown of, we're going to go on this trip to see this community, but I don't know about the visa situation to get there, or what are the roads going to be like, or et cetera, et cetera. Maybe there's new unknowns that we're going to have to react to. But I have my stuff in place. Yeah. I'm ready. I'm kind of ready for almost anything.
Yeah. Yeah, the things, you know, a lot of countries that we worked in were either post-war or actually during a war.
Yeah.
So that was another factor that you cannot play games with. It's good to have good local organizations that you work with, and you trust them to not lead you into super dangerous places, but ambushes happen.
Yeah.
So that's another factor that, you know, if that would be continually on your mind and driving you nuts, you wouldn't be the right person for that kind of work.
Yeah. So I mean, now having had an entire career working, having raised a family, having been a partner, been a husband for all the years since 1976.
Yeah.
I mean, do you have any? Is there a particular guiding principle? Is there any particular message or thought or bit of advice you could give others about how you've lived your life, and maybe something you want to share?
Well, one thing is to find out what you're good at or what you enjoy. If that can also be your work, that is very important. You meet people who are living for the next weekend or for the next moment that is going to be somehow blowing them away or somehow very special. But it's great if Monday can be as exciting as Friday, or more exciting if you are actually enjoying the work you're doing. Quite a few people that I meet, friends that stayed in Landmark or stayed in Manitoba, they would say things like, "I don't think I could ever do that." They would feel very uneasy doing the kind of work and moving around to different places. I didn't think of it that way when I was young, and I took it a day at a time. Somebody asked me, how can you do that to your family, to move to a place that has so much disease? AIDS was a very big thing then. And we thought, well, you expose yourself to challenges wherever you are. We're not suckers for punishment. We don't want to be trying to think of the word, but anyway, you don't want to be exposing ourselves to undue dangers.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, we don't want to just live in a way that is so safe that we don't even want to leave our house.
Yeah.
Sometimes in Congo, or even in other countries, let's say Zambia, people would ask about the theft and so on. How can you live like this? Because there is a lot of theft. And I say, well, you got to live. I've found that I kind of live between a place of total paranoia and foolishness, in the middle there somewhere, where you're not foolish, you're doing what you can, and you're not going to, but you're not going to live. Sometimes our living there seemed a little bit closed in and barricaded. We lived similar to what other people of our kind would live.
Yeah.
But you didn't blanket everybody in the country as a thief. There are those. There are also many here. That part isn't that different.
Yeah.
But each country, each society has its own challenges to live with, and we try to adapt as much as we can, and hope and pray that we'll be okay.
Yeah.
Most of our peers financially have done better, but that's a good thing that there are other reasons for living than just financial gain or financial security.
Yeah.
The kind of things that we've been able to do, we can't necessarily put a dollar value on them, but a lot of people, by traveling 6 months of the year or so.
You almost could, though, if you would look at your peers that might have earned more.
Yeah.
But if you look at the experiences you've had in life that make you feel like you've had a richer life, that's almost the dollar value.
Yeah, well, a richer life for myself, that's...
and I would argue probably your family.
Yeah.
And
you expose kids to something quite different than if you stay in one town and one farm. It's not good or bad.
Yeah.
But it's different.
Yeah. What do you think the point of life is?
That's maybe different for every person. point of life for me and for me and Lydia and our children, I hope, is to live lives that are positive and contribute to the betterment of people, not only our family, not only me personally, but those around me. That, and in fact, I use the talents that I have for others. It's a big. I think that's been a big thing, a big part of our life. Yeah. I've been spending a bit of time going through boxes of stuff at home these days. One thing about the life we've had is we've been able to reduce the clutter in our house. Although we moved a lot, we seem to have way more clutter than I thought we had. But looking into those different boxes and culling things and throwing things away and taking things to the thrift shop, I come across all kinds of things, and this, memories of all kinds of the children, of the family, and it reminds me of again of how important decisions are, and when we make decisions and thinking of myself and ourselves, the decisions that we've made throughout our lives have impacted on other people, but especially on our three children, and they had no say in that, or they had little say in it. I wouldn't say no say, but some people like to say they make decisions by consensus, and they dupe themselves into believing that that little 1-year-old has the same say as the 35-year-old. It's a bunch of bunk. No, I mean, and some people try to live like that. Yeah. That everybody around the table has. We made decisions. We openly talked about what we were planning to do. But I think certainly for you, the three of you, at the ages that you were at in Swan River, let's say, when Mom and I were talking about what our future might hold, I don't think it sank in to you totally, because you had never done that. You lived in Landmark and in Swan River. When you're talking of Congo, the depth or the importance of those discussions and those decisions are played out in our lives, but they're played out in the three of your lives as well. Certainly we would ask you, what do you think of this, and so on, but what could you think of? Yeah. And it brings me a little bit to tears sometimes when I think of how decisions that we make impact a lot on our children, and you on your children. Yeah. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad. Yeah. But you can't tell ahead of time. You can weigh things, but you sure can't tell that going to Congo is that much better than staying in Landmark. But it was the right fit. Yeah. And some of that you can actually only see when it's done and when you look back to it. Yeah. Even this whole thing about find what you like to do. I had a lot more trouble with that than some do. Some they pick up. My dad's a dairy farmer, I'm a dairy farmer. Yeah. That's what I'm going to be. That's what I will do, and I've already started my herd. Yeah. When I'm 16 years old, I'm already beginning to have a little corner of the barn. Those are mine. For me to learn and to know what I wanted to do, it took a while, you know. Yeah. I was in my 30s. I was just barely 29 or so when we got married. Well, some have already zeroed in on a certain métier, a certain trade or vocation. And for me, I wasn't waffling as much as I was just not sure.
Yeah.
And I kind of agriculture or teaching, but I enjoyed studies, but I didn't enjoy it that much. I liked to be outside.
Yeah.
When school was going on.
Yeah.
And so I kind of eliminated that, but I kept the two ideas alive for quite a while.
Yeah.
And then when I'd really take stock, then it would seem like agriculture was really the way. But then I didn't get I had some farmland, but we didn't pursue that as much as we pursued going overseas using the agricultural knowledge and experience that I had.
Yeah. I even think like now, you know, with me and certainly with the next generation, there's so much noise.
Yeah.
There's so much calling to us. And you could do so many things. Just to be able to calm all the voices and try to hear like, well, what really resonates with me? And is there a vocation? Is there a way I could pursue this? And it also just that piece about maybe it's not going to earn that much. Maybe it's not going to be incredibly lucrative. But something that you always say to me, or have said throughout my whole life, is if it gives me life, like what you just said earlier, if you're excited, if you're as excited to go back to work on Monday as you are to finish the week on Friday, then that's the job for you.
The job or the field.
Or the field, yeah. Well, Dad, thanks for taking the time to sit down and have a cup of tea with me. I always like, whenever we can have a chance to sit down and have a conversation, it means a lot to me to be able to talk to you face to face. It means a lot to me to be able to hear about your experience, the life you've lived, and the reasons why you've lived your life. I feel like it gives me a lot of, it inspires me. And it helps center and ground me as I think about how I want to live my life, how I want to raise my kids. So thanks for taking the time.
Thank you for taking the time with me.